For a while, portable gaming had stopped feeling magical. It still worked, it still sold, and people still carried handhelds around, but the format had settled into something predictable. You bought a smaller machine, you pressed familiar buttons, and you played inside limits that already made sense. Then Nintendo showed up with a device that looked like it had taken a wrong turn out of the future. The Nintendo DS did not arrive looking like a cleaner Game Boy. It looked folded, strange, almost over-designed, like Nintendo had decided that the safest move was suddenly too boring to attempt. 2 screens on a handheld felt unusual enough. Making one of them touch-sensitive made the whole machine feel like a challenge, not just a product. That first impression mattered, because the DS did not ask players to admire it for power alone. It asked them to reconsider what a handheld even was. Was it a mini console, a toy, a communication device, a touchscreen experiment, or something in between? That uncertainty became part of its power. And that is what made the DS story so strong from the beginning. It was not the obvious future. It was the strange future, which meant people had to touch it, test it, and talk about it before they could decide what it really was. By the time that conversation started, Nintendo had already won the most important thing, attention. What Nintendo did next was even more important than the hardware itself. Instead of treating portable gaming as a race toward raw horsepower, the company built the DS around interaction. The machine launched with dual screens, wireless play, a built-in microphone, and backward compatibility with Game Boy Advance games, but the deeper idea was not specs. The deeper idea was behavior. Nintendo was asking players to tap, drag, scribble, blow into a microphone, write on a screen, and think across 2 displays at once. That meant the DS did not only change what your hands were doing. It changed the rhythm of attention. One screen could hold the world, while the other held your choices, your tools, your map, or your fingerprints. That sounds ordinary because modern devices trained us to accept touch as natural. In 2004 and 2005, it was not ordinary. It made the DS feel less like a reduced console and more like a compact little machine built around human gestures. And once the body language of play changed, the audience had room to change with it. Even features that now feel small helped shape that identity. PictoChat was local and limited, but it made the system feel social. The microphone was simple, but it made the handheld feel reactive. Wireless multiplayer was not new to the world, but on a device like this, it made portability feel communal instead of isolated. That is why the DS mattered before it ever dominated. Nintendo stopped trying to prove that portable gaming could be stronger. It tried to prove that portable gaming could feel different. In the long run, that was the smarter bet. Nintendo's official history and hardware pages still reflect that design philosophy through the emphasis on dual screens, touch, and expanded use cases. A lot of hardware companies build machines that impress people for 5 minutes. The DS was built to feel interesting after the first touch. That difference is everything. This is the point where the DS stopped being only a hardware story. A handheld can launch with a clever design and still remain trapped inside the same old audience. The DS escaped that trap because its software did not only reward experienced players. It invited new ones in without apologizing for it. Nintendo still had the familiar pillars. Racing, platforming, adventure, Pokémon, Mario, all the expected gravitational centers were there. But around them, a different layer of software began to grow, and that layer changed the machine's cultural identity. The DS did not look like it wanted to speak only to dedicated gamers anymore. That was the quiet revolution. A parent could get curious. A commuter could give it a try. Someone who never thought of themselves as a gamer could see a stylus, a touch screen, a simple interface, and feel less intimidated than they would with a traditional control scheme. Nintendo later tied this broader appeal directly to titles like Nintendogs and Brain Training, which helped define the touch. Generations push. And notice what happened when that barrier fell. The DS stopped behaving like a specialist object. It started behaving like a household object. Not everyone used it for the same reasons, but that was exactly the strength. A system becomes culturally dangerous when different people can explain why they love it in completely different ways. That is why the DS spread with such unusual force. It was not one machine selling one fantasy. It was one shell carrying many emotional entry points: curiosity, habit, comfort, challenge, routine, social play, and simple novelty. Once a platform gains that kind of flexibility, it becomes much harder to push back out of daily life. Plenty of game systems become popular. Far fewer become normal. The DS was becoming normal in the strongest possible sense, ordinary enough to fit into life, but distinct enough to remain memorable. And once that happens, the market conversation changes. You are no longer asking whether a handheld is impressive. You are asking how many corners of life it can enter before people stop noticing it as technology and start noticing it as part of the day. If you want to feel the cultural turn in a more personal way, look at what games like Nintendogs and Brain Age were doing to the image of portable gaming. Nintendogs did not sell itself as a test of mastery. It sold care, touch, attention, and return. Brain Age did not promise a grand adventure. It promised a daily ritual small enough to fit between ordinary tasks. Those are not minor differences. They change the emotional temperature of the device. A machine built for races, battles, and reflex can still be beloved, but a machine that also invites nurturing, self-improvement, and tiny routine starts to live in different parts of a person's day. Nintendo explicitly connected these games to the widening appeal of the DS. That broader mood is easy to underestimate if you only look backward through sales charts. The real shift was psychological. People who might never have described themselves as part of gaming culture could suddenly justify opening a DS for a few minutes because the interaction felt light, useful, charming, or simply easy to understand. And that had consequences far beyond those two games. Once the DS was accepted as something more than a conventional game machine, the whole platform benefited. A wider audience means more habits, more recommendations, more visibility in public, and more chances for the hardware to become a social object instead of a niche possession. The DS story becomes even clearer when you place it beside the PlayStation Portable. Sony's official PSP announcements leaned into power, multimedia ambition, and premium portable entertainment. On paper, that made perfect sense. If the future of handhelds was supposed to feel closer to console spectacle, then the PSP looked like the more obvious machine. And to be fair, there was real force behind that vision. Sony described PSP as a new handheld entertainment platform, not just a game device, and the machine's visual identity was sleek, cinematic, and confident. It looked like the portable future if you defined the future through polish and horsepower. Sony's own releases from 2004 through 2006 show that positioning very clearly. But the DS was competing on a different axis. It was not trying to dominate the eye. It was trying to dominate routine. That is a much quieter battle, and often a more powerful one. A device that wins 10 minutes of daily life can beat a device that wins 5 minutes of admiration. This is where the DS became difficult to dislodge. It fit commutes, school breaks, waiting rooms, bedtime habits, and little social moments. It felt less like an event machine and more like a companion machine. That distinction helps explain why Nintendo's audience broadened while the DS kept gaining cultural ground. So the story is not really that one company cared about power and the other did not. The story is that Nintendo cared more deeply about repetition, accessibility, and the shape of ordinary use. In the end, that is what made the DS feel larger than the machine itself. A lot of hardware rivalries are won in comparison videos. This one was won in backpacks, coat pockets, and quiet moments when someone reached for the device that felt easier to live with. If the original DS was the idea, the DS Lite was the moment the idea became desirable. Nintendo's official Fast Facts placed the DS Lite launch in 2006, and that revision matters because it transformed public perception without abandoning the machine's identity. The core concept stayed the same. The shell grew cleaner, slimmer, brighter, and easier to love on sight. That may sound cosmetic, but cosmetics are rarely trivial in consumer electronics. A revision can sharpen the emotional message of a product. The original DS told people to pay attention. The DS Lite told them to want one. The brighter screens helped. The tighter silhouette helped. The softer, more polished presence in public helped. The DS Lite made the whole line feel less experimental and more finished, like Nintendo had taken the strange promise of the original machine and refined it into a product that could move from hit status into outright craze. And this mattered for more than sales. It mattered for visibility. A handheld that looks better in someone's hand becomes easier to show in public, easier to gift, easier to imagine as part of modern life. Desire amplifies normality. This was one of Nintendo's smartest moves of the entire DS era. The company did not treat early success as a reason to freeze the design. It used refinement to intensify momentum. By the time the Lite arrived, the DS no longer felt like a gamble. It felt inevitable. That is the moment many products dream about and never reach. First, people are curious. Then, they are convinced. Finally, they start to feel left out if they do not have one. The DS Lite pushed the Nintendo DS line much closer to that third stage. This is the chapter that matters most, because it explains why the DS still feels culturally important. The real achievement was not just that millions of people bought one. The real achievement was that the machine changed the micro-habits of daily life. It made portable gaming feel routine again, not as a fallback form of play, but as its own complete rhythm. A few minutes before bed. 10 minutes on the train. A short break after school. A quiet stretch on the sofa while someone else uses the television. The DS flourished in those small spaces, and those spaces matter because they are where technology stops performing and starts belonging. That is why the phrase portable gaming became meaningful again in a stronger sense. Before, it could simply mean that the machine was small enough to carry. With the DS, portability also meant that the experience could bend around real life without losing its identity. The device was compact, but the role it played in people's days was much larger than that. Nintendo reinforced that role through revisions too. The official DS timeline later expanded into DS Lite and DSi, with DSi adding cameras, downloadable software, and new built-in features. That expansion shows how confident Nintendo had become in the basic idea. The company understood that this was no longer a one-off hit. It was a portable ecosystem. And here is the deeper emotional truth. A dedicated handheld can feel like a private world. You open it, disappear into it for a while, then fold it shut and return to ordinary life. The DS preserved that feeling while making it easier, friendlier, and more flexible than it had been in years. That may be why so many people remember the device so personally. Not just as a console they owned, but as a companion to a phase of life: school years, train rides, holidays, waiting rooms, family trips, quiet evenings, and all the small in-between moments that bigger machines never quite claimed in the same way. By the end of its run, the Nintendo DS family had become one of the best-selling video game systems ever made. Nintendo's official sales data lists the family at 154.02 million hardware units sold, with software totals in the hundreds of millions as well. Those are extraordinary numbers, and they place the DS among the most commercially successful machines in the medium's history. But numbers alone do not explain why the DS still feels important. Plenty of successful systems move huge amounts of hardware. Fewer manage to alter the relationship between games and daily life. The DS did that by merging accessibility, novelty, routine, social play, and design experimentation into one coherent object. And then the world shifted again. Smartphones rose. The culture of portable screens changed. Dedicated handheld gaming had to renegotiate its place all over again. But the DS remains a hinge point in that story, because it proved that people would gladly carry a game world with them everywhere if that world felt natural to open and natural to close. That is why the DS era still glows in memory. It was one of the last great moments when a dedicated handheld felt like its own small universe, folded into your bag, your pocket, your routine, and your identity. So here is the real question: was the Nintendo DS the last time portable gaming felt completely like a world of its own? Tell me your favorite DS memory in the comments, and subscribe before the next chapter powers on.